Welcome to another exciting episode of the Future CFO podcast, where we dive into leadership, career management, and the latest trends shaping the future of finance. This podcast is brought to you by futurecfo.info, your go-to platform for practical finance and CPD courses. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your network.
Today we have a gentleman, a friend, a brother, a partner, and a young Gambian accountant. Welcome, Mr. Salifu Ba. Salif is a chartered accountant. He has previously worked in Deloitte. He worked in Ecobank and Access Bank. Presently serves as the finance director at the Gambia Petroleum Commission. An award-winning CFO, one of the tax experts in the Gambia. Let's meet with Salifu, a very long conversation, and hence we had to divide this session into 3 different clips. For those of you who are watching from the YouTube, there are 3 different clips. But let's go and meet with Salifu and enjoy the conversation. Hi, Mr. Salifu Ba. Welcome to the Future CFO podcast.
Thank you.
To start with, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this program or watching it, whichever platform, would have known your name, because anytime we talk about the Future CFO platform or an institute, you are one of the co-founders. But today we want to discuss about your career path, career growth from your own experience and your own advice. But before we begin, I think it would be important you tell us what has been your story, what inspired you for you to take on a career in finance and accounting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sawane, and thank you for having me on this platform, the Future CFO. And I think reflecting back, my journey as a professional accountant started the village, if I can put it. I'm a village boy like you, as it is called. From Pakao Njogu. A lot of people would know, but again, my mom is from Kirmama. It's good to put that context. So on both fronts, I'm from the provinces. And interestingly, in my career, I would say my dad was the first person to go into conventional school from our village. So that could tell pretty much a story. And the second person pretty much enrolled into school because he was taking my dad to school. We are not far from Albreda, if you know where James Island is. It's just a couple of kilometers from there. So that's where the journey started. But my career, I can link it to my village life, in the sense that my grandfather was the alcalo at the time. And if you know how alcalos are, there are a lot of people, when they come to the village, they have to interact with the alcalo. And sometimes my grandfather actually used to take me to these alcalos events. And if things happen at a very early age, I will have to write in English or read certain things and relate to him, because I was the youngest among the people there. And I think, and I was the one going to school, myself and my siblings. So, and secondly, funnily, maybe a lot of people wouldn't know, because those days at the village setting, there are people that they will appoint to be selling medicine, paracetamol, aspirin, those things. So my grandfather will give me the bicycle and I will go around villages and sell. So when I come, I have to account for it and how it is. So at the time, I didn't know that this is accounting. That's the truth. But now reflecting back, I think my journey is coming from there. But moving fast forward, after completing my high school, which I've dropped out 2 times, I think, after when I completed my grade 6 to grade 7, I dropped out for certain reasons. And I enrolled to some extent to be a carpenter, actually. So you see my hand here, I have a scarf. So somehow. So all those things actually saved me. But fast forward, when I completed my grade 12, like any other person, I wanted to travel. And one of my uncles, the youngest in my mom's side, actually came back from the UK at the time. Then, we were trying to see what is possible to travel, which couldn't be. But again, he was trying to look for a business for me in the market. You know how foolers are when you say about business. So luckily, he took me to this guy called Omar Tarawale. It's good to put context to these people, to look at my results. After looking at my results, he said, you know what, why not you do CAT? At the time, I didn't know much about university because I think it's only my father who is educated. My mom is not conventionally. But again, because he was away for a long time, we didn't have that, educational bonding as to guiding you towards that process. And I'm not the only son. You have a lot of sons within the family. So you are not the only priority at the time. And with Omar, he said, you know what, you can do CAD. But moving backward, when I was in high school, I used to teach my colleagues accounting as well. Because I finished from Sheikh Maska, we used to have people from Gambia High School that will come to the school and we will exchange. So I can remember one of them will help me with economics, then I will help him with accounting. So after when Omar saw my results, he basically said, you know what, Omar Tarawale was then working with Deloitte, has just completed his card, I think at the time, and he said, this is in 2009. And he said, Salifu, why not? You can enroll and do the card, And I think that's where the journey began. Then I later moved in. I know we will discuss the rest as we move on. But my career, I think there are a lot of things that saved me through that process journey of being an accountant. But to set the record straight, I never knew that I will be an accountant during my school days or in my early days. Today, here I am with my ACCA and with my masters and so forth, maybe working in the petroleum sector from private Deloitte and now to the public sector.
I was just listening and watching. If some extent you are telling me my own story, so I was going to wait at a point where the stories are going to be apart. And interestingly, like you said, all of us comes from the village, and I mean there are many more of that in the Gambia. I had dropped out of school twice. You had dropped out. I wanted to be a carpenter before. You also had that experience. So I think where the difference is came from was on that 2009. 2009 is you probably enrolled into CAT. That was when I became a member of ACCA, so I could see the difference came in. But it's always interesting to know, because these are our stories. If we don't go deeper into our story to understand why we follow certain paths, we are not able to advise young people, being our own younger brothers and sisters or our own children. They have to understand why we decide to do certain things. When I'm talking to children, I always tell them, I didn't ever plan to be an accountant or a CFO. I always be a teacher. I want to teach people. I want to share knowledge. So sometimes you are in certain circumstances because that's the part you felt will probably help you to improve on other parts of your life. Like in my own case, was the issue of money. So you talk about the fact that now you have your ACCA, now you have your master's, and many other programs that you have followed. Let's talk about the ACCA a bit, because it's a common thing in the Gambia. Globally, it's very well recognized, and all of us, many of us, have pursued the same program. But we know completing ACCA is a tough one, and I know because I'm close to you when you are on this journey. I know you had challenge in passing some of these exams. You had probably attempted some of the papers, probably maybe 2 times or 3 times, but you know the true story. People had the same challenges. I also know people in the country who had repeated some papers 3 or 4 times and they just stopped. So today they are, because there is nothing like ACCA part, qualified. I hear those things, but ACCA, you only qualified or you're not qualified.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So today
Absolutely.
they're not qualified and they have no other program they can talk about. But your own journey, what was the motivation that kept you to continue even multiple attempts and until the point you finally passed your exams and you became a member?
Yeah, interesting. I think ACCA defined me as a person in the sense that I think my first or most of my deepest failures or setbacks, I don't even call them failures, but setbacks in life was during my ACCA program. And it teaches me a lot of things, but one of the most out, highlight, or I would put it the highlights of my ACCA journey, it teaches me to be humble. Humble in the sense that I started my career with colleagues and friends at the time, and I, did self-studies, the card. At the time, people were attending lectures and so forth. So at this point, I would even like to recognize Mr. Toka, Martin Toka, because when I started my card, then you had MDI and Grace who were doing it. So I went to Mr. Toka, who at the time I had some financial difficulties, who offered me to say, oh, you can do the card for free, the force papers, through the support of Cherno Cham. At the time he was doing ACCA. I like mentioning names for people to know that, yeah, as part of your journey, there are people that have contributed in one way or the other.
That's important.
Yes, and when I was introduced to Mr. Tucker, at the time, he said, you can come in and you can pay whatever you can do. I have to go back to the village as a fuller. My mom have to sell some cows and, give me to pay my school fees. At the time, it was draft that they will send to the banks. It's good for people to know because now people pay through maybe bank transfers or even electronic with cards.
Yeah.
But when we were doing the card, it was a draft. But the setback on ACCA, okay, I passed all my cards first attempt within 1 year, 6 months at the time because it's six months. I passed all my papers. Ibrahim, you exempted in the second level, first level. Went to the second level. I did F4, F6, which was tax. I did F7, which was financial reporting. So I did F9, which was financial management. Then the management accounting, which was the F5, my first setback. At the time, I had already started my Deloitte career anyway. We will have to have a conversation on that. My first failure, I was working under Mr. Lamjata. And what was funny is that was my first setback. I never knew that this is how it can be difficult. I almost quit because the way I used to study is this. Immediately I finish exams, I don't wait for results. I jump straight to the next paper. You don't have a life. You're working full-time, a young man. And at the time I actually left the family house. Now I was living alone just to make sure that I study. Very close to Deloitte, living in Kololi. If you know those days how Kololi was, I used to live there with my family, but at the time my family had moved to Joswang. So I moved back to Kololi. And if we say Kololi, everybody knows how it is with the fanfare of Senegambia and all that. But I was not drawn into that. I was closer to Deloitte. I have friends like Suleiman Job who were working in Deloitte at the time, Malik Dem, now, all these people doing great things in their own, space, finance. But this failure, I can remember that when Mr. Jata told me, Salifu, this is normal. And I sat with him, I think, for about 20, 30 minutes, and he was counseling me. But looking back, I said, having to pass my previous exam without failing, what about the people who were failing? Am I more intelligent than them? No. Am I, better than them? No. What I need to do is to do a self-reflection. Why did I fail? Yes, at the time, there were not many materials as now, where you just then you have BPP, and I think, and Kaplan that you have, Kaplan that you have to use. And, with the support of my friends, study groups, close friends, then it helps me to refocus and reshape myself. Then I swiftly moved to the part 2, completed it with one failure, then went to part 3, passed P1, P2, P3, then I went to the optional. Failure hits me again, Ibrahima. But then luckily, I think I started with tax. Today, I will maybe make, a lot of people don't know this. People will call me, yes, you understand tax, but I did not complete my ACCA with tax. I failed tax 3 or 4 times, I think. Yes. Then I said, you know what? I cannot continue failing. And I couldn't know what was the reason because I would study with colleagues. I will be lecturing colleagues on tax, but exam day comes, 49, 48, 46. So this is how it was working. So I said, you know what? I like financial management. And this have some things to do with my career later as well, which we're going to discuss. So I went for P4 at the time. Yeah, advanced financial management. First attempt, 79. Second attempt, 79. Now I was confused again. What to do?
That must be 49, 49.
49, yeah, 49, 49 in both.
Right.
So I said, you know what, this will be my last chance. But at the time, I had already had I was married, I have my first child. Then in fact, my last exam, my wife was on, how do you call this? She was expecting this. In fact, I was just from the hospital after her delivery. Then the next day, I went to
exam.
To do my exam. So as I was going to the exam, I had to go by the hospital, check my daughter, and moved into the exams.
I was gonna say it's a girl because they say
exactly. It's when some of this tradition people don't. Okay, I don't want to say I believe it that much, but when she delivered, subconsciously it hit my mind and said, and I was not studying that much as I used to do. But I said, fate is there, let me just go. And there it was, because even one of my papers as well, when the boy was, when she was delivering the boy, then she was not in the country. On my way to the exam hall, I think she called me that she's going to the labor as well as one of my exams. So, but interestingly, this was my ACCA journey. But the highlight is it keeps me to be humble, that some of these failures or some of these setbacks that I call them, they redefine you as an individual, to know that you are not an island, but again, there are things that you've missing. And the other thing I think that helped me, which I have to mention today, is I think around that time you've already released your first book, which was 10 professional something. I forget now past. Yeah, I think we just use it past. So I religiously read that book, I think more than 3 or 4 times, religiously, to understand the steps, that because not many people were fortunate or were privileged to have what you have or what you had, which was to pass first time. Because I had Cherno Cham, which I'll mention, was very inspirational at the time, me, because he only failed once, which was P4. I can vividly remember those things. But again, it just teaches me that as an individual, if you are into something, go into it 100%. I can remember those days I don't go in family functions. Most of my family members, external family members, did not know who I was at the time. And to a point, one of my family members, we met at what gathering, and she said, Salifu, I did not know you. And I was really sad, because this is someone that is my cousin, like close cousin, first cousin, as they call it. And I went to my uncle and said this. He said, Salifu, it's because you are into this path. The day that you complete this, everyone will know you. So please be onto what you are doing. And I think now, reflecting back again, all these support systems, all this humbleness that it brings to me, now I don't see failure in anything that I do. Whatever I see I did not achieve, I take it as a setback, go back again, repivot, check what I could have done better, and that's it. The next thing is, if you had asked me 10 years ago whether you would be a chartered accountant, I would say no. You'll have your master's and graduate, I would say no. You'll be a CFO, I'll say no. You will work in banking, I will say no. Even working in public sector, I'll say no. But here I am. That's what destiny is. But again, I prepared for the opportunities. And those setbacks that I faced, because I'll not call them failures, definitely shaped me as an individual. And even today, how I relate with people.
Yeah, indeed, very powerful. And like you clearly said, those exam failures are pretty much a simple setbacks. The true failure comes in when you withdraw from the program because you fail to pursue your dream, your goal. That's when you can extend to some extent, make yourself close to a failure as far as that program is concerned. But that persistence is very important. Like they said, it is not the goal you change, you can change your paths. How, and I think I like that example of you giving on the taxation, where you wanted to become a chartered accountant, but you failed tax 3 times. You decided to say, okay, there is a better way for you to still be a chartered accountant. Take another course. And again, in my own story, I was deliberate when I was picking my papers. I love tax. I did tax. I did advanced financial management. Those are the 2 courses I did on my advanced papers. But auditing was not something I was interested. I know a lot of my colleagues, they are saying do audit, but I say I don't want to do audit. It's not something I'm interested in. Now, after ACC, I know you did your master's and you have done many other programs. But one thing I observe, and this is not only for accountants, many people finish program, whether it's their bachelor's degree or their master's program, and maybe they feel like they are okay. Whether you say, I won't say they say they think they know it all, but the fact that they get qualification, whether it's in accounting or ACCA, you don't see them pursuing other programs to upgrade themselves. So we know this is essential. But my question to you, how do you pick your interest on what programs you are going to study? In other words, after ACCA, you did all these short program, masters, maybe certificate in here and there. How do you select them, especially in tune to your career growth, since we are talking about career growth?
Yeah. Interesting. And I think this is what a lot of chartered accountants fail to do after completing, that you believe that your ACCA alone is enough or your master's alone is enough. But again, if you go to the job, you hardly do 50% of what you have learned on textbook. That's obvious. Maybe 50%, in fact, is on the high side on what you learn on ACCA. Yet it guides you.
Especially if you're in Gambia.
Yes, exactly. Especially when you are in Gambia. Maybe in Gambia it's less than 15 or 20% of what you have learned. So I think one of the things that guides me, one is I always try to be relevant. What I try to do is first is to look at my job description, my place of work. How do I put myself relevant? If you ask me today, for instance, which is the most current one, what I try to do is communication. Is something that I am very passionate about because I work in the public sector. But again, data, because I work with maybe very qualitative data, not quantitative a lot, but qualitative data. How can I analyze, make stories out of this qualitative data that I'm doing? So there are a lot of sites that I go to. Sometimes I have conversation with you, but sometimes I go to Coursera. There are courses there on data analytics, but data presentation as well, both qualitative and quantitative data courses are there. You have Harvard, they're offering sometimes free courses, sometimes you pay. I go on those courses. Very intentional, one of them which you have helped as well. I used to participate to some extent on the Toastmasters. You may not know, but when you were in Nigeria, it helped a lot, increase my confidence of communicating because at this stage, you don't expect me to deal a lot with numbers, but analyze them and present them. And that presentation, in terms of telling the story, I need to understand how it relates to. Just a couple of days ago, I enrolled on Table Source as well, where you just put in a spreadsheet
it analyzes the data for you, make stories for you on the data. And these are all tools that AI is helping you to do. So I think I always try to look at what makes me relevant, but more so what I am passionate about, especially when it comes to data and data interpretation. Because with my current role, like I said, my stakeholders, all what they need is how clear can you make this information to them? But more so, how can we analyze the data and present it to the public for them to understand exactly what we are doing for them in terms of accountability and so forth. So I think relevance is one thing that guides on the things that I do, not the technical accounting anymore, not the finance anymore, but I look at my current job role, which is different when I was at GNPC, where I had to look at doing more of Excel, doing visualization to some extent with Power BI, because that was what was relevant at the time for me. And those skills are very helpful today. But again, if you want to stay relevant in your job place, these are things that you have to look at. What is needed to increase productivity in your workspace? What is needed and that is not being done by other people, but can bring something different. And you don't need to sit and wait for people to tell you. Just be inquisitive, relate with people that are maybe different environments, different countries. It helps me personally. I relate with you. I relate with Sua. I relate with Suleiman. I relate with people that are into consulting. I relate with anyone. And anytime that I have a conversation, I try to look at inward. How can I use that conversation to improve myself? But I do more of listening to some extent from people just to learn from them, because from this book that I'm currently in fact reading, which is Things That You Don't Learn at Harvard, this is what I'm learning. Listen more, and you gain to learn more by listening. And it's really shaping me a lot, or helping me in designing what, other things that I do. And this, I'm very intentional on that. On daily basis, I say it, I must have to read something. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be finance related, but unknowingly, it could one day help you in your job or things that you do. And, you never know where you see yourself in the world, to even chip in conversation, because sometimes people, believe in you or get into you, not because you're technically good in accounting, but how can you relate other stories and bring them to your profession? That is very important, how vast you are. And I think that is what relevance, like I said, is one of the things that is guiding my, furtherance of education or any technical skills that I may need. And for me, this is a continuous thing. It's never ending. Every day, anytime, any minute that you have, spend it on that, being it conventional books, even being it the Quran. Sometimes there are things that, not sometimes, in fact, anytime that you read it, there is something that you can relate to it, either with your work or what do you do. So I think reading, being intentional about it, is really helping me on that and staying relevant. Yeah.
Great. I mean, in summary, yeah, you spoke about the relevance, and for one to look into that, you have to know your job. You have to see how do you add value. And if I summarize all of this to some extent, it's more like a career plan that you put in place. I am here. How do I add more value that can give you opportunity to grow? You don't get super focused on the growth itself. If you create value, you will see that this growth will come along. But of course, you have to be intentional around it and learn most relevant things. Today, we are in the time of AI. You have to understand what AI can do to support your career growth. It was those who understand Excel alone in those days, probably 10, 15 years ago, they were able to grow. And it's Excel plus AI with some other analytical tools like Power BI, Python, and the rest. That is very, very important. And you talk about something on communication. This is something that is quite many times missing from media accountant, because even in our programs that we do, whether it's at the university or our ACCA programs, communication is given to us as an important skills, but I don't think we were taught enough how to communicate, because the very difficult thing is one thing to tell you, you have to do a good presentation, but it's a different thing for you to do a real communication. And this requires training. This requires more practical training. You gave many programs or platforms which you've learned, Coursera on the Harvard Business School. You talk about all those things. And of course, our own newly founded Future CFO platform now started having similar trainings. We don't intend to compete with Harvard for now, but we believe we will make our own impact, giving those practical knowledge to young people at a more reasonable, low cost. Now, I know you are involved in tax. Now, when I looked at the matter of career transition, I think you are one of those guys who we can give a classical example of career transition. You started, I think, at some point in time, if I recall, with a travel agent for a short period or so. If I recall, you probably work with a travel agent. Then
not travel agent, an airline actually.
Airline. Okay, so
Yes.
I know there was something, let's say, in the hospitality industry. So you move all the way to Deloitte, you do taxation, went into banking and finance, then you move into what I would call state enterprises, as in GNPC, that one may not probably call a pure public sector because GNPC is supposed to be a company. So GNPC, you now work in government. Now you are working in government, central government as a regulator. This is a bit of a transition. And I know many young people reach out to us in one way or the other. They want to transition from one job to another, from one function to another. How were you able to put this thing? What was the story? Because it was, for me, a successful transition where you are growing. What's the story around your transition that make it more successful like this?